To understand the prehistoric timeline of the Indian subcontinent, we divide it into three primary technological eras: the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, and the Neolithic Stone Ages. We start at the baseline, the Lower Paleolithic. Spanning from roughly 2.5 million to 300,000 years ago, this period sits firmly within the Pleistocene epoch, a long, brutal ice age. This is the environment the earliest hominins, like Homo erectus, navigated as they migrated into the subcontinent. Survival relied on the Acheulean industry. Looking at these specific artifacts, you can see the defining technology of the era: massive, heavy quartzite hand axes and cleavers. They were bulky, unrefined, and strictly designed to be gripped in a fist to butcher large, slow-moving megafauna. Between 300,000 and 30,000 years ago, during the Middle Paleolithic, the climate shifted to a prolonged humid phase. Hominins, like the Narmada human, adapted by refining their tools. Using the Levallois technique, they struck smaller, specialized flakes from stone cores, creating dedicated scrapers and pointers. Then, the Upper Paleolithic brings a drier climate from 40,000 to 15,000 years ago. Homo sapiens finally emerge in the region. We start finding specialized bone tools, like needles and harpoons, left behind in the Kurnool caves of Andhra Pradesh. For over 2 million years, human existence followed a strict pattern. They adapted physically to a slow-moving, frozen world, relying entirely on heavy, handheld, brute force instruments to secure their food. At approximately 10,000 BCE, that million-year-old pattern collapses, the Pleistocene epoch ends, and the Holocene begins. Global temperatures spike. The vast ice sheets covering the northern hemisphere retreat. Across the Indian subcontinent, the warming climate triggers massive environmental expansion, and dense, wet monsoonal forests rapidly overtake the dry, icy savannas. The biological landscape shifted. Massive, slow-moving megafauna built for the cold faced extinction as the new forests filled with a wide variety of smaller, faster flora and fauna. A heavy quartzite hand axe is entirely useless against a fleeing deer or a rabbit. To extract calories from this fast-moving, highly fragmented new biome, early humans had to engineer entirely new engineering techniques and adopt completely new settlement patterns. Throwing a heavy stone requires the user to be at close range, and the sheer weight of a macrolith slows the human arm down. Biomechanically, hunting the agile creatures of the Holocene required distance, speed, and precision. The engineering solution was miniaturization. This is the defining feature of the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age, the invention of microliths. These were highly refined stone tools measuring between just 1 and 5 centimeters. Using fluted core technology, makers applied intense pressure to silica, striking off surgically precise geometric shapes like triangles and lunates. In this system, the stone serves as a replaceable blade, slotted into wooden shafts with plant resin to create a composite assembly. Hafting multiple microliths together created the bow and arrow, granting humans the range and precision to hunt small game at a distance. This engineering leap happened globally, but the chronology was dictated entirely by local geography. In the Levant, along the eastern Mediterranean, similar microlith-using cultures appeared as early as 20,000 BCE. Further south in Sri Lanka, the dense tropical rainforests demanded earlier adaptation. Microliths show up there an incredible 28,500 years ago. In Europe, retreating glaciers created landscapes of rivers and lakes, prompting the invention of dugout canoes and complex fishing nets. In India, the climatic trigger was the intensification of regional monsoonal patterns, forcing populations to adapt to extreme localized variations in rainfall. The Mesolithic represents a diverse matrix of localized technological responses to immediate environmental pressures. We can map out these specific regional adaptations by plotting the archaeological data across the Indian subcontinent. In western India, the climate became increasingly arid. Humans adapted by settling on top of massive sand dunes. Sites like Longnaj in Gujarat and Bagor in Rajasthan perfectly capture this desert survival strategy. Bagor is one of the largest and best documented sites in India. Excavations here reveal 3 distinct phases of continuous occupation, with stone-paved floors acting as windbreaks and crucially, the subcontinent's earliest evidence of domesticated sheep, goats, and cattle. The data also reveals extreme resourcefulness. The inhabitants of Bangor traveled up to 90 kilometers away to the Deccan Traps just to source high-quality chalcedony rock to manufacture their microliths. Moving east into Uttar Pradesh, the environment changes completely. The Ganga and Balin valleys were humid and wet. At the site of Chopani Mando, we find geometric microliths alongside evidence of semi-permanent circular huts made of wattle and daub. Those huts at Chopani Mando show humans settling in place for extended periods, supported by the intensive gathering and early cultivation of wild rice. Nearby, clustered around ancient oxbow lakes, are the highly documented sites of Sarai Nahar Rai, Mahadaha, and Damdama. The skeletal records at Mahadaha and Damdama present a vivid picture of the population. They were tall, well-fed individuals, but their bones show distinct signs of osteoarthritis, a direct physical toll from the intense labor of foraging. They buried their dead in formal elliptical pits, accompanied by grave goods like microliths, bone ornaments, and ivory pendants. This high degree of localized adaptation repeats everywhere. Eastward in Berhampur, West Bengal, humans adapted to dry, arid pockets. Down south in Tamil Nadu, they occupied the terry coastal sand dunes. And in Jwalapuram, lacking high-quality silica, they systematically manufactured tools out of local quartz crystal. Formalizing burials within habitation areas suggests a transition towards sedentary living. By placing their ancestors directly into the land, these communities established a permanent link to the site, signaling territorial control over local food resources. Beyond physical survival, the Mesolithic yields our first extensive record of abstract human thought and social documentation, preserved deep in central India. Located in Madhya Pradesh, the Bhimbetka rock shelters consist of nearly 400 caves, displaying an incredibly rich tradition of Mesolithic rock art. The artists engineered specific chemical pigments. By grinding iron oxide, hematite, and mixing it with animal fat, water, and plant resin, they produced 16 distinct shades, relying heavily on stark whites and light reds. Looking at the panels, a clear artistic hierarchy emerges. Humans are rendered as highly stylized linear stick figures. The animals, however, are painted with exacting realism and careful anatomical proportion across 29 different species. The walls document a complex social fabric. We see organized hunting parties wearing masks and antler headdresses, communities engaging in coordinated dancing, and women grinding gathered food. The biological record they chose to leave behind is highly selective. Massive beasts like tigers, elephants, bisons, and rhinos dominate the shelters, while snakes, despite being prevalent in the Indian environment, are completely absent from the artwork. We also observe the phenomenon of superimposition. Instead of finding blank rock facers, artists repeatedly painted directly over older artworks. In some locations, there are up to 20 layers of pigment stacked on top of one another. This intense layering suggests these specific shelters were occupied continuously across generations. They served as central nodes for ritual practice, cultural continuity, and social memory. Between 6000 and 4000 BCE, the thousands of years of human adaptation hit a critical threshold. The tiny razor-sharp composite microliths are gradually phased out. In their place, humans engineer heavy, efficiently polished ground stone axes, known as celts, specifically designed for clearing dense forests to make way for fields. Generations of Mesolithic humans intensively foraging for wild seeds, observing plant life cycles, and selectively breeding captive animals yielded a massive database of botanical and biological knowledge. They knew exactly how to manipulate their local flora and fauna. Applying this knowledge triggered the Neolithic Revolution, the New Stone Age. Populations transitioned globally from hunting and gathering to full-scale agriculture, constructing permanent sedentary villages and firing clay to create pottery for long-term grain storage. At Mehrgarh and Baluchistan, we can track this exact progression. The site begins with aceramic mud brick homes and the domestication of wheat and barley, eventually scaling up to feature massive compartmentalized granaries and the utilization of the potter's wheel. Distinct regional variations take root immediately, In the Kashmir Valley, the inhabitants of Burzahome build deep pit dwellings to survive the extreme cold. In the Gunga Valley, sites like Koldawa yield the world's earliest evidence of cultivated rice. The Mesolithic was a dynamic period of experimentation. By refining their tools and mastering localized ecosystems, Ice Age survivors built the exact agricultural and social infrastructure that would eventually support the cities of the Indus Valley Civilization.